Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here for the penultimate chapter of Stuart Little. This is chapter 14, An Evening on the River. And to me, this is an exciting chapter because I feel like Stuart he's a very, I would say he's kind of a show-offy person, but in a really good way. Hey guys, hey, thanks. Now we got some people. Hello, hello. This to me is a very interesting chapter. I've read this book before. All right, ready to read. Thanks for tuning in, y'all, whatever time it is where you are in the world. So, as we remember yesterday, Stuart pulled up his invisible Ferrari into Ames Crossing, which is a small town where the great-grandfather Ames used to ferry British soldiers and American soldiers to make a buck and made his fortune. And then his great-granddaughter, Harriet Ames, who happens to be just a little bit shorter than Stuart, although Stuart is the appearance of a mouse, and this is just a tiny person, which is kind of confusing to me. Thank you, Sludge Bob. All right, here we go. An evening on the river. When Stuart arrived at his campsite by the river, he was tired and hopped. He put the canoe in the water. Oh, he got a canoe yesterday, too. He put the canoe in the water and was sorry to see that it leaked badly. The birch bark at the stern was held together by a lacing, and the water came in through the seam. In a very few seconds, the canoe was half full of water. Darn it, said Stuart, I've been swindled. He paid 76 cents for a genuine Indian birch bark canoe, only to find that it leaked. Darn, 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 he muttered. Well, I mean, it was a toy canoe, right? But it shouldn't leak. Then he bailed out his canoe and hauled it up on the beach for repairs. He knew he couldn't take Harriet out in a leaky boat. She wouldn't like it. Tired though he was, he climbed a spruce tree and found some spruce gum. With this, he plugged the seam and stopped the leak. Even so, the canoe turned out to be a pretty cranky little craft. If Stuart had not plenty of experience on the water, he would have gotten into serious trouble with it. It was a tippy boat even for a souvenir. Stuart carried stones from the beach down to the water's edge and ballasted the canoe with stones until it floated evenly and steadily. He made a backrest so that Harriet would be able to lean back and trail her fingers in the water if she wished. He also made a pillow by tying one of his clean handkerchiefs around some moss. Then he went for a paddle to practice his stroke. He was angry that he didn't have anything better than a paper spoon for a paddle, but he decided that there was nothing he could do about it. He wondered whether Harriet would notice that his paddle was really just an ice cream spoon. There's Stuart getting frustrated with his rig. Stuart is my boyfriend's a goofy friend. You know. All that afternoon, Stuart worked on the canoe, adjusting ballast, filling seams, and getting everything shipshape for the morrow. He could think of nothing else but his date with Harriet. At supper time, he took his axe, felled a dandelion, opened a can of deviled ham, and had a light supper of ham and dandelion milk. After supper, he propped himself up against the fern, bit off some spruce gum for a chew, lay there on the bank dreaming and chewing gum. In his imagination, he went over every detail of tomorrow's trip with Harriet. Look at this. I like him cutting down a dandelion with his axe. And then he's having a little dazzled ham, little dandelion milk. Tomorrow's trip, every detail of tomorrow's trip with Harriet. With his eyes shut, he seemed to see the whole occasion plainly. How she would look when she came down the path to the water. How calm and peaceful the river was going to be in the twilight. How graceful the canoe would seem, drawn up on the shore. In imagination, he lived every minute of the evening together. They would paddle to a large water lily pad upstream, and he would invite Harriet to step out onto the pad and sit a while. Stuart planned to wear his swimming trunks under his clothes so that he could dive off the lily pad into the cool stream. He would swim the crawl stroke up and down and all around the lily pad, while Harriet watched, admiring his ability as a swimmer. Stuart chewed the spruce gum very rapidly as he thought about this part of the episode. There's Harriet. This is Stuart's imagined perfect date with the micro woman, Harriet Ames. Suddenly, Stuart opened his eyes and sat up. He thought about the letter he had sent and wondered whether it had ever been delivered. It was an unusually small letter, of course, and it might have gone unnoticed in the letterbox. This idea filled him with fears and worries. But soon he let his thoughts return to the river. As he lay there, a whippoorwill began to sing on the opposite shore. Darkness spread over the land, and Stuart dropped off to sleep. The next day dawned cloudy. Stuart had to go up to the village to have the oil changed in his car, so he hid the canoe under some leaves, tied it firmly to a stone, and went off to his errand, still thinking about Harriet and wishing it were a nicer day. The sky looked rainy. Stuart returned from the village with a headache, but he hoped it would be better before 5 o'clock. He felt rather nervous, as he had never taken a girl canoeing before. He spent the afternoon lying around camp, trying on different shirts to see which looked best on him, and combing his whiskers. He would no sooner get a clean shirt on than he would discover that it was wet under the arms from nervous perspiration, and he would have to change it for a dry one. He put on a clean shirt at 2 o'clock, another at 3 o'clock, and another at 4:15. This took up most of the afternoon. He's a nervous wreck. As 5 o'clock drew near, Stuart grew more and more nervous. He kept looking at his watch, glancing up the path, combing his hair, talking to himself, and fidgeting. The day had turned chilly, and Stuart was almost sure that there was going to be rain. Couldn't imagine what he would do if it should have rained, just as Harriet Ames showed up to go canoeing. At last, 5 o'clock arrived. Stuart heard someone coming down the path. It was Harriet. She had accepted his invitation. Stuart threw himself down against a stump and tried to strike an easy attitude, as though he were accustomed to taking girls out. He waited till Harriet was within a few feet of him, then got up. "Hello there," he said, trying to keep his voice from trembling. "Are you Mr. Little?" asked Harriet. "Yes," said Stuart. "It's nice of you to come." "Well, it was very good of you to ask me," replied Harriet. She was wearing a white sweater, a tweed skirt, short white wool socks, and sneakers. Her hair was tied with a bright-colored handkerchief. Stuart noticed that she carried a lot of peppermints in her hand. "Not at all. Glad to do it," said Stuart. "I only wish we had better weather. Looks rather sticky, don't you think?" Stuart was trying to make his voice sound as though he had an English accent. I don't know. Stuart's trying a little too hard here. All right. All right. Just checking up on your all's messages. So this is Harriet showing up for the date. Stuart acting chill, even though he's sweating through his shirt, talking in an English accent. Trying too hard. Harriet looked at the sky and nodded. "Oh, well," she said. "If it rains, it rains." "Sure," repeated Stuart. "If it rains, it rains. My canoe is a short distance up the shore. May I help you over the rough places in the path?" Stuart was a curious mouse by nature, but Harriet said she didn't need any help. She was an active girl and not at all inclined to stumble or fall. Stuart led the way to where he had hidden the canoe, and Harriet followed. But when they had reached the spot, Stuart was horrified to discover that the canoe was not there. It had disappeared. Stuart's heart sank. He felt like crying. "The canoe is gone," he groaned. Here's Stuart losing it as he sees this canoe is not there. Then he began racing wildly up and down the bank, looking everywhere. Harriet joined in the search, and after a while they found the canoe, but it was a mess. Someone had been playing with it. A long piece of heavy string was tied to one end. The ballast rocks were gone. The backrest was gone. The spruce gum had come out of the seam. Mud was all over everything, and one of the paddles was all bent and twisted. It was just a mess. It looked like it looked just the way a birch bark canoe after some big boys are finished playing with it. That's so sad for Stuart. His canoe got utilized. Stuart was heartbroken. He did not know what to do. He sat down on a twig and buried his head in his hands. Oh, gee, he kept saying. Oh, gee whiz. That's Stuart feeling really sad. Not the big boys. What's the trouble? Asked Harriet. Miss Ames, said Stuart in a trembling voice. I assure you, I had everything beautifully arranged. Everything. And now look. Harriet was for fixing the canoe up and going out on the river anyway, but Stuart couldn't stand that idea. It's no use, he said bitterly. It wouldn't be the same. The same as what? Asked Harriet. The same way as it was going to be when I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm afraid a woman can't understand these things. Look at the string. It's tied on so tight I could never get it off. Well, suggested Harriet, couldn't we just let it hang over the water and trail after us? Stuart looked at her in despair. Did you ever see an Indian paddling along with some quiet, unspoiled river with a great piece of rope dragging astern? He asked. We could pretend we were fishing, said Harriet, who didn't realize that some people are fussy about boats. I don't want to pretend I'm fishing, cried Stuart desperately. Besides, look at that mud. Look at it. He was screaming now. He's kind of having a meltdown, honestly. Harriet sat down on the twig beside Stuart. She offered him a peppermint, but he shook his head. Well, she said, it's starting to rain, and I guess I'd better be running along if you are not going to take me paddling in your canoe. I don't see why you have to sit here and sulk. Would you like to come up to my house? After dinner, you could take me to the dance at the country club. It might cheer you up. No, thank you, replied Stuart. I don't know how to dance. Besides, I plan to make an early start in the morning. I'll probably be on the road at daybreak. Are you going to sleep out in all this rain? Asked Harriet. Certainly, said Stuart. I'll crawl in under the canoe. Harriet shrugged her shoulders. Well, she said, goodbye, Mr. Little. Goodbye, Mrs. Ames, said Stuart. I'm sorry our evening on the river had to end like this. So am I, said Harriet. And she walked away along the wet path toward Tracy Lane, leaving Stuart alone with his broken dreams and his damaged canoe. Yes, exactly, Sludge Bob got it. I feel like that's the end of the chapter, by the way. Stuart has this idea of how the night's supposed to go, and then things get off to a different kind of start, and then he can't even that he has to adjust the plan. It disheartens him so much that he just rather quit. And it's clear that Harriet is okay with this. She just wanted to hang out with Stuart, but he's too full of himself to even come off of that ledge. But so it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad scene for Stuart, but maybe Stuart wasn't ready, I don't know. This is a coming of age. I just think that scene is interesting to me. And then also Stuart is a small mouse born to humans, and Harriet is a small human born to humans. So I'm like, that's curious too, but that doesn't get explained. All we know is that Stuart, I feel like, takes himself very seriously. So Harriet should be comforting. She does comfort him a little bit. I mean, she's like, hey, like, that's all right. Why don't we just try to do it a different way? Or why don't we do this instead? But Stuart's not chill. So I don't know when the next time he's going to have another chance to meet somebody of his stature. She offered him a place to stay. Yeah, she said, we can come over and have dinner. We can go to the dance. Anyway, that to me is kind of a shocker. And they don't go into that he's sleeping under the broken canoe. Yeah. They don't go into the kids movie with, I'm talking about the film version. They don't have a scene where Stuart goes on a bad date. But I think they should. Anyway, y'all, thanks for tuning in. We got one more chapter. We're going to see how the saga ends tomorrow, maybe in the morning. likely. Maybe some of y'all will be at school. I'm not sure, but it'll happen sometime tomorrow, maybe in the morning. Hopefully you can tune in. If you can't, you can check in later. It's all good. So thanks for tuning in, y'all. Tomorrow, no. Oh yeah, Labor Day tomorrow, y'all. So let's just do it in the morning then. Thanks for tuning in. I don't got nothing else to say. I gotta go to work in a little bit. So I love y'all. Take care. Have a good afternoon. Bye bye.